What's going on, everybody? Long time no see. This is Dips coming at you with a 2023 Conjuring tutorial. So this is everything that I've learned from the 8 years of gloving slash conjuring. So I'm going to be going through in this video what is conjuring, how to get your gloves into conjure mode. I'm going to be going through some conjuring moves. I'm also going to be going through some transitions from conjuring into normal gloving. And yeah, just kind of gonna do a flow of consciousness style. A lot of people have been asking me recently about how to get into conjuring and how to improve the conjuring. And I feel like I've got some knowledge to share, so let's get into it. First things first, gloves. What am I doing? What am I rocking? You can do this with most any gloves. A lot of gloves are harder to get now, which is unfortunate. There's some new stuff coming to market. But what am I rocking? I am wearing the Evo Spectris on these fingers, and then I'm wearing the Elements on my thumbs. Reason being is that I like to be able to change my color modes fairly easily, and so I do I wear my Spectris. However, I still feel like the Elements are the brightest of the chips that aren't for like impacting, and that's why I still use the Elements for these. So yeah. So then, second question, like what is conjuring, and how is it different than impacting? So conjuring is nothing more than the playfulness with your lights to both pass the light back and forth, and then it's also playing with the absence of light, right? Like there's no light here right now, but because I just grabbed that light, that in its essence is still conjuring, right? So it's both the absence and the presence and the movement of the light and playing with it. Okay, so now next question, how do you get into conjuring mode? Well, on the Elements and the Spectris and most of the Emazinglights chips, and this is going to differ for like futuristic and LED, but it should show you in the manual. So for the Spectris and the Elements, you hold down from the off position until you get to green. Okay, so green. Once you're on the solid green, you hold down for a second, and now you're in selecting. So I held down for a second, let go, and now I'm in selection mode. And so this is the same mode where you can actually reorder all of your modes. So if I select multiple modes, it'll only select the ones that I want, and then when I'm clicking through, it'll go to those different ones. I'm only gonna select one mode. And by only selecting one mode and then exiting the selection, I will end up in conjure mode. So then I'll have a one click off, one click on type of deal. So I'm just gonna go to my first mode. Once you go to your first, I went to my first mode by clicking once, and I'm clicking on all of these. You then will hold down for a second to select, which brings you back to the green, and then you hold down for another second, and then you're in conjure mode. So that's kind of how that works. So that's how to get into conjure mode. So now, same thing with my thumbs. I'm just doing one on, like just clicking one time. And so now I'm in conjure mode. Another really important thing to remember slash know when you're getting into conjuring, it's much easier to conjure if you wear the button of your chip against your finger or your thumbs. Also for conjuring, if you'll notice, all of my chips are on the bottom. Most glovers are going to wear their chips on top, and it's still completely possible to conjure with your chips on top, but many of us find it much simpler to do it with the chips on bottom. So kind of that's how to get into conjure mode. That's how to wear your chips for conjuring. It's kind of the basics, right? So now, basic moves. So, this is my right hand, this is my left hand. What you want to do is you want to practice just first turning on the chip and turning off the chip. That's the easiest thing in the world, right? I'm just clicking once, then clicking off. What you're gonna need to do is figure out your timing, right? So I can click on a chip and then take my other hand and time it so that whenever I turn off this one, I turn this one on. Right? And so if you take that basic concept and then you add some motion to it, you get this illusion of passing around the light, right? And so right now I'm just playing with my thumbs, and that's kind of, when you're conjuring, that's in the beginning, that's my recommendation, is just play with passing the light around with your thumbs until you can get that timing down. And you can do different things with it, right? Like a big favorite is the eating of the light, passing it between and under your arms, through your ears. Sometimes I'll just pass it, bring it back. So once you've got the timing down and the motions down, that's when the showmanship comes into play. So a really, really important part of conjuring is showmanship. And having showmanship without, in my opinion, being overly cringy, if that makes any sense. Like I don't want my viewer to think that I'm like some, I guess I'm kind of a clown, but I don't know. I don't want me to be the focus. I think that's my point. I want the light to be the focus for the most part. So that's whenever you start playing around with the light, like I said, you pass it. And if you'll notice, I'm looking and watching the light until it comes back. Okay? And so that gives the illusion that the light is moving and I'm monitoring it. I talked to Tylo, who's another great conjurer. He used to go by Encephalotripsy. But Tylo is an amazing conjurer, and one of the things that he brought up is that a portion of conjuring is playing with the absence of light as well. And that's also something that I learned from Bruce Solia Ruse, who's a fantastic clover in his own right. So playing with the absence of light is also super important. So not only am I going to pass the light around, but you'll notice here that when I throw it, there's no lights on, right? You yourself are part of the show in that sense that you're watching the light until it comes back. Same thing, I can grab this light and there's no lights on right now. I can grab this light, and so now there's this illusion of hiding the light behind my hand, right? Until I turn it back on. And then I turn it off, there's no light on. That same one goes for hiding the light in something like this fold that I do sometimes, right? So right now I'm timing it, but every now and then I'll turn the lights off until I come back around. So I think that kind of covers the basics in terms of what is conjuring and kind of how to wrap your head around the basic concepts of showmanship and the different things that you can do. I think I'll get into a few different moves. So at the very basic one, right, is passing the light back and forth. Very, very basic. Eating, uneating, right? And all of this has been thumbs so far. I'll get into some finger stuff. Grabbing and hiding, no light, bringing back up. And when I do that one, and again, this is something I learned from Ruse, when you do that one, you really want to sell that you're grabbing it. And then you open your hands back up to reveal, right? And then to extrapolate on that a little bit, or elaborate, whatever the word I'm looking for, and this is where we get into some finger stuff. Oh, and let me backtrack. When I'm doing this move and when I'm turning on these lights, the best place to click is going to be on the top of your hands, like on the top of your index. I would say the majority of time when I'm turning my thumbs on and off, I'm clicking that location, right? Most of the time. Now, another spot that I often click is just folding my thumb over and clicking against kind of the meat of this area right here. And yeah, I find that hard casings are much easier to click with than soft casings, and that's why all of my lights that I wear are hard casings, because it's a little bit more bulky, and I find that it's not as sensitive, and so I can control things a little bit more. So I wear only hard casings. So for thumbs, I click there, I click here against the meat of this spot right here. Sometimes, every now and then, if I have a light already on, I'll click against another light. But beyond those three spots, that's generally where I'm always clicking my thumbs, unless you're doing something like against your own body. Cool? So that's thumbs. So moves with thumbs, continuing. Cages. So a cage is when you start with your light at one point of your hand and you move your fingers and pass the light through so that the observer has this illusion that a light is moving behind your fingers, which is not really an illusion because there actually is a light moving behind your fingers. Now, you can do that and then pass off into this kind of infinite, which also works horizontally, right? But what I often think looks a little bit better if you're trying to do the infinite is to keep one light and then just move your other hand's fingers in front of it. And so then you're doing this constant ladder where there's this light is just kind of moving behind, right? Oftentimes I'll move from here to and just kind of turn this light on to come back to here. Other single, just one light things I know, so this is something I do all the time, is I'm gonna eat this light and then immediately turn this light on up here. So, and then when I turn this light on up here, I bring it down to the viewer, and if the camera is my viewer, instead of moving the light over, which is fine, I guess, what I found is I actually like a little bit more is to bring the light within the viewer's field and then move my arm, right? So the difference is this versus this, okay? And then a pattern that I often use is eat, down, arm movement to here, turn on this light, okay? So it's gonna pass through until it's right there, and then you drag. And this is an impacting move. And a lot of stuff from impacting and conjuring is interchangeable. So I use impacting and I watch impactors all the time. Nate Calavan is one of my good friends and one of my favorite impactors. If you ever get a chance to watch some of his shows, highly recommend. But just watching some impactors and learning some of their moves is it's good to know. Something that I haven't quite covered is the difference between impacting and conjuring. So for all intents and purposes, they're the same in a lot of senses. The main difference is that the chips that you use have different timers. So for conjuring, it's one on, one off, right? For impacting, it's one on, and then if you click within a certain amount of time, it goes to a different mode. And then if you click again within a certain amount of time, it goes to a different mode. And if you hold down between those clicks, like if you hold down instead of let go, you stay within a mode or you turn off or something. I forget what it is exactly. Anyways, it's fucking complicated. And those guys and ladies deserve a ton of credit because it's really difficult. Really difficult. So if you ever play around with it, that's the main difference. But the moves are really interchangeable. Another single finger thumb, or not single, another thumb trick that I often like to do, and I forget which impactor I got this from, so I apologize, is this one. Okay, so you start in this position. I add a little flair by going out and then showing that there's no light on this hand. I close this, come up and over, and you'll notice how this hand's turning, and then pass through, turn on this light, and then you're in this position. So this is my left hand, this is my right hand. With your left hand, you're gonna come up, pull your right hand behind, and then come into this position. Pass through, turn on though, right? Pass through, come back over, and do the same thing. And what you end up with is this move. Which now that I watch, I need to clean this up a little bit, but you get the point. And then you can come back the other way. Okay? Another thing that I learned from a lot of impactors, specifically Nate, is the concept of when you are dragging to move your fingers, right? I often think of this light being kind of a thing that I need to clear a path for. And the act of clearing a path is oftentimes a very cool thing to observe because it's cause and effect. So if I'm coming down, I'm causing my fingers to move, right? So that drag is a cause and effect. So then I'll come around, move around my thumb, right? So there's no other lights on, but the motion around the light is oftentimes part of the showmanship. It's hey, there's this thing, this is your focus, but there's all this stuff going on in the backdrop, right? So you can, with just thumbs, you can do whips, you can do flail. Well, yeah, I mean, you can do whips. I do whips all the time with this, right? You can do flail work. You can do patterns. But yeah, there's so much you can do with it. I'll get in. So I would say most of my conjuring is thumb work. I think if you were to look back at all of my videos, I think I have a lot in common with impactors in terms of like my style and the things that I like. Um, Most of my finger stuff is gonna be actual gloving. Um, I'll show you my finger moves real quick. I've forgotten more than I remember at this point. I had some pretty cool stuff that I just don't remember anymore, if I'm being completely honest with you. But the main stuff that I do now is another one when I go here, right? Instead of doing your thumb, right? This is where you turn on all of the lights and then turn them off, right? So the position to turn all of your fingers on is just a closed palm, closed fist. All of my lights are not like a clenched fist, just your hands pressing against this part. And it might be difficult initially when you're doing it, but it'll come to eventually. And that's what matters, right? So very easy. Easiest way to practice is just with doing finger rolls. So you know a normal finger roll, right? When you're done with the finger roll, click them all. Click them. Click them. Click them. Right? That's one position to do it. Another position that I sometimes do is if I'm doing this, if I'm like this, I can press my lights. I can press these lights against here and these lights against here, and then they're all on and off. That's another good position, even though I missed some, which I just missed one, right? So this is another note to discuss. A part of showmanship is to make sure that your observer does not notice your mistakes. And so sometimes they're just going to see your mistakes, and that's totally fine. But what you don't want to do is draw attention to your mistakes. Drawing attention to your mistakes, whether you're a normal glover, conjurer, impactor, whatever, there's no reason to draw attention to your mistakes. It'll ruin your show. It'll take people out of observing your flow, because then they get in their own head. And the entire point of giving a light show is to kind of have this freedom of like thinking for a second, both for the glover who's trying to enter into a flow state and the observer who's just trying to observe, right? Don't bring attention to your mistakes. It's very easy to quickly act like you meant to do stuff, right? So if I have, I'm doing a move, right? And then let's say that I mess up a click. So I mean to turn them all off, but in doing stuff, I forget to turn off this one, okay? It's very easy. Point it out, take the light, play with it, right? You meant to do that. You meant to make that mistake. It's part of your show. Make it part of your show. So in terms of whole finger moves, whole hand moves, right? So one thing I like to do is if I'm coming, so this, actually, it's not part of it. Yeah, I mean, I do it from this sometimes. So this is my right hand, this is my left hand. I come up here as if I'm like kind of throwing this whip, right? So if you know how to throw a whip, this is part of that move, but I don't actually throw the whole thing. And then when I come back, I turn them off, and then they're back on. Very similar to that, I'll come to the side. So, hello, I have lights, right? Lights are on. Come to the side, turn them all off. Present, hey, my lights are off. Oh wait, they're on. JK. Cool. Do it both sides, practice both ways. Okay. Trying to think. I mean, just playing with lights, right? So, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just turning them on and off in sequence. Right? So then you can do some playfulness with your hands. And so one thing that I do often do is with one light, I'll put it on the index finger and then take my hand and swipe, and now they're all on, right? So index finger, swipe, now they're all on. I oftentimes, when they're all on, I'll come back to this position. So a good position to turn on all your lights on and off is anytime you could normally do a whip. If you are in a position to normally do a whip, you're in a good position to turn your lights on and off, because you're already in the position where your hands are clenched against your palm, right? So if I'm throwing a whip, at that point, I can turn off and on the lights. Cool. So I think that's the majority of stuff that I can think of in terms of like move sets. I think what I'd like to discuss is transitions now, because you'll kind of find this as you move along in your gloving journey and I learned this for a while, like there's a shit ton of stuff you can do with Conjuring, but there's not as much stuff that you can do with Conjuring as you can do with normal gloving. So they play off of each other in a really good light show, in my opinion. So if you're a really good glover and you are able to throw in some decent Conjuring, then that's awesome. You can also be a really good conjurer and then throw in some decent gloving. If you can do both really well, then that's an exceptional light show. And I think that that's kind of where, wow, I'm blanking on the go right now. That's bad. I'll put the name in the description and some videos, but just being able to do some of that stuff is like being able to be really good at both is kind of important. I don't think you should. I think you should try to put focus and emphasis on both at different periods of your gloving adventure and journey, and just kind of do what feels right at the time. If for a while you want to focus on a certain skill set, then continue to focus on that certain skill set until you get really good at it. Once you're really good at it and you're bored of getting really good at it, go learn something else. And then once you're good at that thing, go back and kind of work on cleaning up some of your other stuff. Don't get trapped in, hey, I'm a conjurer, I'm only gonna do conjuring stuff. No, like try to be a whole package. One of my friends who I give a light show, I think it was Maddie, she told me one time, she's like, you're more than just a good conjurer, you're a good glover. And that was a awesome compliment for me. I want to be a good both. So yeah. So let's talk about transitions. Sorry, I went on a tangent there. So I usually start my shows with lights on. And when I get into a show, I'll oftentimes not make it obvious to my viewer that I'm a conjurer, because I want it to be an element of surprise. I want the fact that I'm able to turn my lights off in a moment's notice, something that they're not going to expect. So what I've started to do recently is put my hands behind my back and turn them on. Okay. I'll go into normal gloving tech for a show, right? I'll give the very basics, build up the drop, right? So you can imagine that like a drop is coming. And then my favorite thing to do is to go into conjuring at the drop. And so a good way to get from normal gloving into conjuring is to get into a spot where your hands are clenched. This is a good spot. This is a good spot. Whips are a good spot. Hey, I could turn off all my lights here. Whips are a good spot. My goal is to get down to 2 or fewer lights. Okay? Right? So any place where my hands are closed. So if I'm here, going into a drop, hey, I'm a conjurer. Surprise! Everybody's like, whoa, that's wild. Because it is. Cool? So then you're in single mode. You're able to play around with some of the moves that we discussed and talked about. Turning on and off your lights. These are all very simple things, but musicality is important. Here's another move that I just remembered that I do. So I've got no lights on. I come here. Okay. I'm gonna turn on only my index and just do a little cluster. If you have ever watched any of Tylo's videos or Skylar, who's coming back around, you can see some of his videos. He goes by Scrappy. He's awesome. But some of this tech stuff, I don't know a lot of it. I'm not very good at it. But if you can get good at conjure tech, it's a whole nother thing. And maybe one of those guys will make some tutorials about that. So this is another move that I get into, right? I've only got 2 lights on right now, but my other fingers are closed, so I can turn them all on. Off. Cause and effect. And I'm always searching for spots where I can turn my lights on and off. Okay. Finger rolls, always a really good transition spot for conjuring. So what I often will do is a finger roll, and then I'm gonna bring my right hand up. So now, hey, no lights. Cause and effect. This light is moving, causing these fingers to come around. So just that again, right? Throwing these fingers. I just turned them off. So they were on. Everything's off. Throwing the fingers. Hey, nothing's on. Come back around. Hey, it's on. Turn these back on too. Off. Cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can really think of. I mean, from so I think I talked about from conjuring. Just conjuring to normal gloving. I find that flowy stuff is easier to get into than tech. You can get into it from tutting. There's some tutting stuff you can do. Right? This here, Conjuring. Any spot that you have a closed fist. When I'm done playing with my lights, I like to go to 2 lights, and then once I'm in 2 lights, all my lights, and then you go into normal gloving. All right. Let's add a intricacy to this. I've not done this in ever. I do. Oh crap! Make sure I screw up my lights. Should be good. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna talk about multi-mode conjuring real quick. So hold on all the lights so that I can get to green. To get out of conjuring mode, when you're on this, you go from the bright green to the light green and then hold down for half a second, and then you're back into your normal. Okay, so now when I click, my lights are switching colors. This is what most people are normally gonna be in. Cool. I always keep my thumbs in single mode. It's just how I like it. I don't like to do multi-mode for thumbs because it throws me off. I know a lot of conjurers who do multi-mode thumbs, and that's super cool. But I don't do it. I don't particularly like it. So what you can do in multi-mode conjuring is all that stuff that we just talked about. It's very similar. It's pretty much the same. For your thumbs, for sure it's the same. But now when you click, you're going to go into a different mode. This requires a little bit more playfulness. And again, it's the element of surprise. So I'll often keep a single mode all the way leading up to the drop. Okay? And then I'll turn off all but one of the lights and then grab it. Oh, look, I'm in a different mode. And then you can double click to go into that. The difference between the hard things about multi-mode is keeping track of how many clicks in, like what set you're on, right? So now when I click and then I click again, I'm on a different set. Well, if I want to be on a different set for each one of my lights, I have to mentally track where I'm at. And so you can do that just by kind of putting yourself in a position to like quickly look at your lights during a show. You can also you'll get to a point where you just click and you just know, right? You're like, okay, all of these look right, nothing looks off. Oh, this looks off, let me click one more time to get that particular light back where it needs to be. The other hard part about multi-mode conjuring is that in order to turn your lights off, you have to hold down for these specific ones. You have to hold down for half a second. It's not just a click to turn off. You have to actually hold down for half a second to turn your lights off. And that's the thing that you're gonna get with timing. You don't wanna hold down for too long because then you could enter into like a programming mode. But for me, what I'll often do is go through a whip sequence, changing, go to a certain mode for like a text sequence, right? Stay in it for a little bit. Half a second off, go into just 2 thumb sequences. Okay, now I want to get back into normal gloving. So turn on my lights. There we go. And then back off. I've been talking for 40 minutes. there's probably stuff and moves. There's probably knowledge and moves that I didn't cover, but I think for 2023, this is what I got. So, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. I'll try to update this video periodically with some other videos and glovers that I think that you should check out, because I think that y'all would like. I am who I am as a glover and conjurer because of all the people that came before me. I've learned a lot of moves from other people from watching videos, and then I expanded upon those. Some of the moves I didn't expand upon, but it's all about your journey. It's all about how you want to learn. It's fun. I mean, don't be dissuaded. And if you want to sprinkle a little bit of conjuring into your show, go for it. If you want to go full force and be focus on conjuring, focus on it. But just remember that all of it revolves around gloving. Go back, make sure that you're a really good glover so that you can also be a really good conjurer. So then you're a complete package. I think those are the best shows personally. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I'll try to post some videos more frequently. Life, you get older and then things are a little bit more difficult. You have less time, but I still try to stay weird. So hopefully I run into you at festivals. Feel free to come up and talk to me. I'd love to trade shows with you. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'll respond in as timely a manner as possible. Hope you all are well. Hope you all are doing good. Be kind to each other. And talk to you soon. Bye.